I stood in the pouring rain at my grandmother's graveside, the black fabric of my coat heavy with the damp chill of a miserable November afternoon. A few feet away, my younger sister Chloe was practically vibrating with poorly concealed excitement. She was wearing a designer black dress that looked more suited for a cocktail party than a funeral, loudly whispering to our mother about the renovation she was planning for Grandma's historic estate. My parents nodded along, their eyes gleaming with the same greedy anticipation. They hadn't shed a single tear. I kept my head down, my hands shoved deep into my pockets to keep them from shaking. That was when my fingers brushed against a thick, heavy envelope hidden in the lining of my coat. It hadn't been there when I put the jacket on that morning. I traced the wax seal on the back with my thumb, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I didn't know it yet, but that single hidden letter was about to detonate a bomb that would completely obliterate my family's lives, leaving their greed exposed and their futures in absolute ruins. To understand the sheer magnitude of what happened, you have to understand the toxic hierarchy I grew up in. In our house, Chloe was the undisputed center of the universe. She was the miracle baby, born 5 years after me, and from the moment she took her first breath, my parents treated her like royalty. She was delicate, loud, and constantly demanding attention, while I was the quiet, self-sufficient older brother who was expected to simply fade into the background. If Chloe wanted something, the world stopped turning until she got it. I remember being 12 years old, saving my allowance for an entire year to buy a used guitar. The day I finally brought it home, Chloe threw a tantrum because she wanted it. My father literally took the guitar out of my hands and gave it to a screaming 7-year-old Chloe, telling me that I was older and needed to learn how to share. She broke the guitar 3 days later. My parents didn't even reprimand her. They just told me I shouldn't have left it where she could trip over it. That dynamic only mutated into something worse as we got older. I worked double shifts at a diner throughout high school just to afford decent clothes and a reliable used car. I studied until my eyes bled, earning a full academic scholarship to a prestigious university where I double majored in finance and business management. My parents didn't even attend my college graduation. They said they couldn't make it because Chloe had a minor callback for a local theater production, and she needed emotional support. Chloe, meanwhile, floated through life on a cloud of my parents' money. They remortgaged their own house to pay for her out-of-state tuition at a private art school, which she dropped out of after 3 semesters because the professors were stifling her creative aura. She spent the next decade bouncing from one expensive, failing venture to another. A luxury candle-making business, a boutique travel vlog, an organic skincare line, all entirely funded by our parents. The only person in the world who saw through the delusion was my grandmother, Eleanor. Grandma was a force of nature. She was a sharp-tongued, fiercely intelligent woman who had built a massive real estate portfolio from the ground up after my grandfather passed away. She lived in a breathtaking, sprawling historic estate on the edge of the city, surrounded by acres of ancient oak trees. It was her pride and joy. While my parents fawned over Chloe, Grandma was the one who taught me how to read financial statements, how to invest, and how to stand my ground. She saw my work ethic, and she constantly told me that I was the only one in the family with a spine. We spent countless weekends sitting on her sweeping wraparound porch, drinking iced tea, and talking about the future. She despised how my parents treated me, and she openly mocked Chloe's endless entitled demands for money. But over the last 2 years of her life, Grandma's health began to fail. Her mind, once a steel trap, started to show signs of slipping. She had moments of confusion, mixing up dates and names. My parents, who had barely visited her in a decade, suddenly became incredibly attentive. They started hovering around her estate, bringing her meals, and aggressively managing her medical care. At the time, I thought they were finally stepping up. I was working 80-hour weeks at a top-tier financial firm, managing multi-million-dollar portfolios, so I was grateful for their help. I visited Grandma every Sunday, but my parents were always there, controlling the narrative, cutting our visits short, claiming she was too tired to speak with me for long. I should have known they were plotting something. I just never could have imagined how deeply sinister their intentions actually were. The absolute devastation started 3 days after the funeral. We were all summoned to the polished, mahogany-lined office of Grandma's longtime estate lawyer, Mr. Harrison. I sat on one side of the massive conference table, while my parents and Chloe sat on the other, practically vibrating with excitement. Chloe was already scrolling through luxury car listings on her phone. Mr. Harrison looked incredibly uncomfortable as he adjusted his glasses and opened a thick leather folder. He cleared his throat, looking at me with a profound sadness in his eyes that made my stomach drop. "Before we begin," Mr. Harrison said slowly, "I must inform you that Eleanor amended her last will and testament approximately 6 weeks before her passing. The previous will, which had been in place for over a decade, was entirely revoked and replaced." My mother sat up perfectly straight, a smug, triumphant smile spreading across her face. "Yes, well, Eleanor realized in her final days who was truly there for her. We took care of her day in and day out. It's only natural she wanted to update her affairs." Mr. Harrison sighed heavily and began to read. The legal jargon washed over me, but the core message hit me like a physical blow to the chest. According to this new document, Grandma's entire estate, her liquid assets, her investment portfolios, her offshore accounts, and most importantly, the magnificent historic estate, was to be divided evenly between my parents and Chloe. I was left a singular item, a vintage pocket watch that had belonged to my grandfather. Nothing else, not a single cent, not a square foot of property. I had been completely, surgically cut out of the legacy of the only person in the family who had ever truly loved me. The silence in the room was deafening when Mr. Harrison finished speaking. I sat entirely paralyzed, my mind struggling to process the betrayal. Grandma wouldn't do this. It went against everything she had ever told me, everything we had ever discussed. I looked across the table. Chloe wasn't even trying to hide her elation. She let out a loud, delighted squeal and hugged my mother. "I can finally launch the lifestyle brand properly," Chloe gushed, her eyes wide with greed. "And that old house! Oh my God, the developers are going to pay an absolute fortune for that land. We're going to be so rich." I snapped out of my shock. "Developers? What are you talking about?" Grandma explicitly stated 1,000,000 times that the estate was to be preserved. She hated the commercial developers moving into the area. My father rolled his eyes, looking at me with absolute disdain. "Don't be so dramatic, Mark. Your grandmother was confused at the end. She didn't know what she wanted. We've already been in talks with a commercial real estate firm. They want to bulldoze that old relic and build a luxury shopping complex. The payout is going to be astronomical." "You coerced her," I said, my voice rising, trembling with a mixture of grief and pure, unfiltered rage. She was medicated. Her mind was slipping. You hovered around her for 2 years to force her to sign a new will so you could steal her legacy and pave over her home. "Watch your tone," my mother snapped, slamming her hand on the table. "Eleanor was in her right mind. She knew you were too busy with your little corporate job to care about her. We were the ones changing her bedpans. We earned this. You were just a fair-weather grandson. Accept your pocket watch and move on with your life." I looked at Mr. Harrison, searching for any sign of intervention, but the lawyer just stared at his legal pad, his expression entirely unreadable. The will was legally binding. It had been notarized. My family had executed the perfect, ruthless heist. I stood up, my chair scraping violently against the hardwood floor. I didn't say another word. I turned my back on them and walked out of the office, the sound of their celebratory laughter echoing in my ears, burning like acid in my veins. For the next 2 weeks, I isolated myself completely. I was consumed by a suffocating darkness. It wasn't about the money. I had built a highly successful career for myself. I didn't need Grandma's wealth. It was about the profound injustice of it all. It was about my toxic, parasitic family destroying the legacy of a brilliant woman to fund their own delusions of grandeur. But the nightmare was far from over. My family wasn't satisfied with merely taking everything. They needed to humiliate me in the process. On a Tuesday evening, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find my parents standing on my porch, looking incredibly irritated. I tried to shut the door, but my father shoved his foot into the frame. "We need to talk to you, Mark. It's urgent," he demanded, pushing his way into my living room with my mother trailing behind him. "Get out," I said coldly, crossing my arms. "You got what you wanted. We have nothing to say to each other." My mother sighed, waving a hand dismissively as if I were a petulant child. Stop throwing a tantrum. We're here because we actually need your professional help. The estate is complicated. Mr. Harrison is being incredibly uncooperative, and his fees are outrageous. Chloe is far too overwhelmed with planning her brand launch to deal with paperwork, and your father and I are still grieving. You're a financial manager. We need you to take over the administration of the estate, the taxes, the asset transfers, dealing with the developers. You can handle all of that for us. I stared at them, genuinely wondering if they were suffering from a shared psychotic break. Are you out of your minds? You steal my inheritance, plan to bulldoze Grandma's beloved home, and now you want me to be your unpaid accountant to facilitate the destruction? Oh, grow up, my father barked, his face flushing red. It's called helping your family. We provided a roof over your head for 18 years. You owe us. And speaking of which, there is a minor cash flow issue. The probate process is tying up Eleanor's liquid assets, and the funeral home is demanding immediate payment. The bill is $35,000. Since you didn't contribute to her care in her final months, we expect you to cover the funeral cost out of your savings. Consider it your final duty to your grandmother. The audacity was so astronomical, it literally took my breath away. They had inherited millions in assets, yet they were demanding that I empty my personal savings to bury the grandmother they had manipulated, while simultaneously demanding I work for free to help them liquidate her life's work. I'm not giving you a single dime, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. And I'm not doing a shred of work for you. You want to play the wealthy elite? Figure it out yourselves. Now get out of my house before I call the police. My mother's face twisted into a mask of pure venom. You are a selfish, pathetic excuse for a son. We should have known you would abandon us when things got difficult. Don't ever ask us for anything when you finally fail in life. They stormed out, slamming the door so hard the pictures on my walls rattled. I stood in the center of my living room, my blood boiling, my chest tight with a rage so profound it made my vision blur. I walked into my bedroom, intending to throw myself onto the mattress and just scream. But as I passed the chair in the corner, I saw the black coat I had worn to the funeral. The letter. In the chaos of the will reading and my subsequent depression, I had completely forgotten about the heavy envelope I had discovered in my pocket at the graveside. My hands trembled as I grabbed the coat, reaching deep into the lining. I pulled the envelope out. It was sealed with dark red wax, stamped with Grandma's distinctive signet ring. On the front, written in her elegant looping handwriting, were 3 words. For Mark, alone. I broke the wax seal, my breath catching in my throat. Inside was a thick stack of documents and a handwritten letter spanning 3 pages. I sat on the edge of my bed, unfolded the heavy parchment, and began to read. My dearest Mark, if you are reading this, it means I am gone, and the vultures have likely descended. I know what you are feeling right now. I know you are hurting, and I know you probably think I lost my mind at the end. I need you to know with absolute certainty that my mind has never been sharper. For the last 2 years, I have watched your parents and your sister hover around me like starving animals. I heard their whispers. I saw them slip pamphlets for commercial developers under my magazines. They thought I was a senile old fool they could manipulate. They thought they could drug me with heavy pain medication and force me to sign away my legacy. So, I decided to give them exactly what they wanted, or at least, what they think they wanted. Yes, I signed a new will 6 weeks ago. I played the part of the confused, frightened old woman perfectly. I let them believe they had won. But what those greedy, short-sighted fools didn't realize is that a will only dictates the distribution of assets owned at the time of death. And my dear boy, at the time of my death, I owned practically nothing. I stopped reading, my brow furrowing in confusion. I looked at the legal documents tucked behind the letter. They were deeds, trust formations, and corporate filings dating back almost 3 years. I picked the letter back up, my heart beginning to hammer a frantic rhythm. 3 years ago, right after my first mild stroke, I saw the writing on the wall. I contacted a private attorney, not Harrison, he talks too much, and I initiated a massive, silent restructuring of my entire empire. I liquidated the vast majority of my offshore accounts, my investment portfolios, and my secondary properties. I took every single cent, nearly $22 million, and placed it into an irrevocable blind trust. I named you Mark as the sole beneficiary and the absolute controller of that trust upon my death. I gasped, the air completely leaving my lungs. $22 million. My hands were shaking so violently the paper rattled. But I didn't stop there, the letter continued. I couldn't let them have my home. I couldn't let them bulldoze my history. So, I performed a legal maneuver that your father is far too stupid to comprehend. I formally subdivided the estate property. I separated the physical structure of the house from the land it sits on. 2 years ago, I transferred the deed to the entire 50 acres of land. The gardens, the forests, the driveway, the very soil beneath the foundation, into an LLC. And I transferred 100% ownership of that LLC to you. You own the land, Mark. So what exactly did your parents and sister inherit? They inherited the physical house and the shell of my old bank accounts. But here is the grand finale. Before I died, I secretly took out a massive, high-interest loan against the physical house, using it as collateral. I took all that cash and dumped it into your trust. The house they inherited is currently underwater, saddled with millions in debt. They cannot sell the house to developers because they do not own the land it sits on. Any developer who does 5 minutes of title research will run screaming. They wanted my wealth, Mark, but all I gave them was an anchor, and I'm handing you the chain. Do not feel pity for them. They tried to steal from you. They tried to erase my legacy, and they did it with smiles on their faces. Let them drown in their own greed. Use the wealth I've given you to build a magnificent life, and promise me you will keep the old oak tree standing. I have always been so incredibly proud of you. Love, Grandma. Tears streamed down my face, falling onto the parchment. I was laughing and crying at the same time, a borderline hysterical sound echoing in my empty apartment. It was a masterstroke of absolute genius. Grandma had played them with a level of ruthlessness that was almost terrifying. She had set a bear trap, painted it gold, and watched them dive headfirst into it. I looked at the accompanying documents. Everything was legally ironclad. The trust details, the LLC ownership, the property subdivision. I owned the land. I had the $22 million. My family had inherited a crumbling, heavily mortgaged structure sitting on property they had absolutely no rights to. I spent the next 3 days meeting with a team of elite corporate lawyers and financial advisors. We verified every single document, secured the trust, and quietly transferred the massive wealth into my control. My lawyers also pulled the public records on the house. Grandma wasn't exaggerating. The loan she had taken out against the physical structure required astronomical monthly payments. Without the liquid assets they thought they were getting, my family was going to default within 60 days. But I wasn't going to wait 60 days. I was going to spring the trap while they were standing in the spotlight. The perfect opportunity arrived 2 weeks later. My parents and Chloe, absolutely high on their perceived wealth and desperate to show off to the city's elite, decided to host a massive memorial gala and estate sale at Grandma's house. It was a thinly veiled excuse to throw a lavish party, court the commercial developers, and begin auctioning off Grandma's antique furniture to fund Chloe's lifestyle brand. They invited hundreds of people, politicians, local celebrities, and the executives of the real estate development firm they were trying to sell the property to. They did not invite me, but I didn't need an invitation to walk onto my own property. I arrived at the estate at 8 o'clock in the evening. The sweeping driveway was lined with luxury cars. Massive spotlights illuminated the grand facade of the house. Inside, a string quartet was playing. Waiters in tuxedos were passing out champagne, and the halls were packed with wealthy socialites. I walked through the massive front doors wearing a sharp, custom-tailored suit, flanked by 2 of my senior attorneys, Mr. Vance and Miss Sterling. It didn't take long for my family to spot me. I was standing near the grand staircase, observing the sickening spectacle, when Chloe came storming over, her face twisted in absolute fury. She was wearing a diamond necklace that had belonged to Grandma. My parents were right behind her, looking frantic. "What the hell are you doing here?" Chloe hissed, keeping her voice low so the nearby guests wouldn't hear. Security is supposed to keep the trash out. You are ruining my launch party. I came to pay my respects, I said smoothly, taking a sip from a glass of sparkling water, and to see what you've done with the place. My father grabbed my arm, his grip bruising. Listen to me, you ungrateful little parasite. You are going to turn around, walk out that door, and never come back. The CEO of Vanguard Developments is here tonight. We are finalizing the sale of the estate. If you do anything to jeopardize this deal, I will destroy you. Vanguard Developments? I asked, feigning innocent surprise. Are those the gentlemen in the expensive suits standing by the fireplace? Yes, my mother snapped, and they are about to write us a check for $15 million. So leave, now. Actually, I said, my voice rising just enough to carry over the string quartet, I think I should go introduce myself. After all, it's considered polite to meet the people trying to buy your land. I didn't wait for their reaction. I stepped around my father and walked directly toward the fireplace, my lawyers perfectly in step behind me. My parents and Chloe scrambled after me, panic flashing in their eyes. The CEO of Vanguard Developments, a tall, imposing man named Mr. Harrington, was laughing with a group of investors. Mr. Harrington? I said, extending my hand. Mark Evans, it's a pleasure to meet you. Harrington shook my hand, looking slightly confused. Evans? You must be a member of the family. The late Eleanor's grandson? I am, I smiled. I understand you're in discussions with my parents and my sister regarding the purchase of this estate. My father materialized beside me, desperately trying to push me aside. Mr. Harrington, please excuse my son. He's not involved in the estate. He's had a bit too much to drink and is just leaving. I haven't had a drop, I corrected my father smoothly, and I'm very much involved. In fact, Mr. Harrington, I wanted to save you and your legal team a tremendous amount of time and embarrassment. I hear you're offering $15 million for the property. Harrington chuckled, looking at my sweating father. Well, we are finalizing the preliminary agreements tonight, yes. It's a magnificent piece of land, perfect for our new commercial plaza. It is a magnificent piece of land, I agreed loudly. The ambient noise in the room was beginning to die down. People were sensing the tension and turning to watch. There's just one minor logistical issue with your purchase agreement. My family doesn't own the land. The silence that fell over the grand living room was immediate and absolute. Even the string quartet stopped playing. Chloe let out a high-pitched, hysterical laugh. Don't listen to him. He's insane. He's just jealous because Grandma cut him out of the will. We own everything. Harrington frowned, looking back and forth between me and my family. What is he talking about? I stepped aside, allowing Miss Sterling to step forward. She opened a sleek leather briefcase and pulled out a stack of certified, notarized documents. Mr. Harrington, Miss Sterling said, her voice echoing in the quiet room. I represent Mr. Mark Evans and the Eleanor Trust. 3 years ago, the late Eleanor formally subdivided this estate. She transferred the deed to the entirety of the 50-acre property, the land, the surrounding forests, and the access roads, into an LLC of which Mr. Evans is the sole proprietor. The will that the family is operating under only bequeathed the physical structure of the house. Harrington's eyes widened in horror. As a real estate developer, he instantly understood the catastrophic implications. The structure? You're telling me they only own the building, but not the land it sits on? Exactly, I said, looking directly into my father's terrified eyes. And furthermore, my grandmother took out a series of aggressive mortgages against the physical structure before her passing. The house they inherited is currently $7 million in debt. So, Mr. Harrington, if you write them a check today, you are buying a heavily indebted, crumbling house sitting on leased land that you have absolutely no right to build on, alter, or access without my express legal permission, and I assure you, I will never grant it. Harrington snatched the documents from Miss Sterling's hands. He scanned them rapidly. It only took him 10 seconds to see the certified county seals and the irrefutable legal truth. His face turned a deep, furious shade of red. He crumpled the preliminary sale contract he had been holding in his hand. You completely incompetent frauds, Harrington spat at my parents. You tried to sell me land you don't even own? Do you have any idea how much money my firm has spent on zoning research and architectural drafts for this site? No, wait. It's a trick, my mother screamed, her perfectly manicured facade completely shattering. She grabbed Harrington's arm. He forged those. We have the will. Mr. Harrison, read it to us. We are rich. Your will is useless, Harrington roared, shaking her off. A will doesn't override a prior, legally executed transfer of deed to an LLC. You own a pile of bricks that is drowning in debt. My legal team is going to sue you for fraud and misrepresentation. We are done here. Harrington stormed out of the room, his investors rapidly following him. The entire gala had descended into shocked murmurs and frantic whispering. The city's elite were watching my family completely implode in real time. Chloe was hyperventilating, clutching her diamond necklace as if it were a life preserver. Mark, my father stammered, all the arrogant bluster completely drained from his body. He looked 10 years older in a matter of seconds. Mark, what did you do? I didn't do anything, I said coldly, my voice carrying to every corner of the room. Grandma did it. She knew you were hovering around like vultures, waiting for her to die. She knew you drugged her and coerced her into signing that new will, so she let you think you won. She let you inherit a $7 million debt trap, while she quietly transferred her entire $22 million fortune and the land you're standing on to me. Chloe let out a blood-curdling scream of pure anguish. She lunged at me, her hands curled into claws, but my security attorneys easily blocked her, pushing her back. She collapsed onto the hardwood floor, sobbing hysterically in her designer dress, her makeup running down her face in thick black streaks. You can't do this to us, my mother wailed, tears streaming down her face as she looked around at the guests who were now actively recording the meltdown on their phones. We are your family. We took care of her. We deserve that money. You deserve exactly what you got, I replied, feeling absolutely no pity. The weight that had been crushing my chest for weeks finally lifted. You have 30 days to figure out how you're going to pay the mortgage on your new house. But honestly, I suggest packing. Because when the bank forecloses on the structure, I'll be buying it back from them for pennies on the dollar. Now, I believe you have a party to host. I didn't wait for a response. I turned my back on them and walked out the front doors, leaving my parents and my golden child sister sobbing in the middle of a ruined gala, completely exposed, utterly humiliated, and financially ruined. The fallout was spectacular and absolute. Without the millions they thought they had, my parents couldn't make the massive loan payments Grandma had secretly set up. The bank foreclosed on the physical house within 3 months. Just as I promised, I bought the structure back from the bank at a massive discount, successfully reuniting the house with the land. Chloe's lifestyle brand collapsed before it even launched, buried under the massive debt she had incurred throwing her lavish parties. My parents were sued by Vanguard Developments for the legal costs associated with the fraudulent sale attempt, draining whatever meager savings they actually had left. They were forced to declare bankruptcy and move into a small, rented apartment 2 towns over. The wealthy friends they had tried so hard to impress abandoned them entirely. They tried to contact me, of course. My phone was flooded with voicemails, first angry, demanding threats, which quickly morphed into pathetic, sobbing pleas for financial help. My father begged me to give them just a fraction of the trust. My mother claimed she was sick and needed the money for medical bills. Chloe sent me 10-page emails apologizing, claiming she had been manipulated by our parents. I changed my phone number and instructed my lawyers to send them a formal cease and desist order. It has been 3 years since that night. I used Grandma's wealth to fully restore the historic estate to its former glory. I preserved the gardens, reinforced the foundation, and made sure every single ancient oak tree remained untouched. I quit my exhausting corporate job and started my own boutique financial advisory firm, working on my own terms, from the massive mahogany office that used to belong to my grandmother. Sometimes in the quiet evenings, I sit on the sweeping wraparound porch with a glass of iced tea, looking out over the acres of land that I own. I think about my family, drowning in the miserable reality they created for themselves. But mostly, I think about Grandma. I think about the brilliant, fierce woman who saw my worth when no one else did, and who reached beyond the grave to make sure I finally got everything I deserved.